Chapter 1: The Night Taxi. Winter in Boston felt like a symphony played in minor keys. Snow fell silently, settling into a thin layer of frost over historic rooftops and cobblestone sidewalks. The wind slipped through window cracks, howling down desolate streets where life seemed to retreat indoors, surrendering the city to stillness and cold. A silver taxi glided down Tremont Street like a ghost. The car was worn, with chipped paint on the doors and cracked leather seats. Behind the wheel sat a man in his early 40s with hollow eyes. Ethan Cole. Ethan was no ordinary cab driver. Gray streaks framed his temples. His nose was sharp, and his eyes carried the fatigue of someone more accustomed to surgical lights than traffic lights. He had once been a renowned cardiac surgeon at Wellington Hospital, the man medical journals called the Golden Hands of New England. But now, his name was buried in tabloid headlines. On the radio, a woman's voice spoke with icy precision. The case suspending Dr. Ethan Cole's medical license continues to stir controversy. Though the medical board has yet to issue a final ruling, his career appears effectively over. Ethan switched off the radio. He didn't need to hear more. 12:47 a.m. A young woman flagged him down near the Park Street subway station. She wore a long brown coat, clutching a small suitcase. Her delicate face was pale from the cold. Ethan pulled over. "Where to?" he asked, his voice deep but not unfriendly. "Wellington Hospital, rear entrance." Ethan stiffened. That name, the place that had once been his world, now felt like a wound that refused to close. He nodded and started the engine. The car rolled slowly into the night, but after a few minutes of silence, the woman spoke. "You're Dr. Cole, aren't you?" Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. His eyes flicked toward the rearview mirror. "I've read a lot about you," she continued. "About the case. The surgery that led to your suspension." She paused, then added, "My father was the patient in that operation. He died on your table." The car slowed as if Ethan himself didn't dare drive too quickly into that memory. Her gaze wasn't vengeful. In her eyes was not anger, but a deep need for truth. "My name is Lila Grant," she said. "I'm not here to accuse you. I just want to know what really happened." Ethan didn't answer right away. The taxi rolled along Commonwealth Avenue, passing rows of shuttered storefronts and dim streetlights casting long shadows. Inside the car, silence tightened like a noose. Lila sat in the back seat, arms crossed, but her voice remained steady. "I've spent a year digging through files, reading medical reports I barely understood. Every time I asked the hospital for information, I was met with silence or red tape. I was told it was a simple procedure," she continued. "Routine. But my father died, on your table, and no one would tell me why." The car slowed to a halt at a red light. "I didn't kill your father," Ethan said at last, his voice rough and low. "But I wasn't told the whole truth either." She leaned forward. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Something about that surgery felt wrong. The way the patient reacted, the timing. But before I could review the post-op data, the board called me in. Next thing I knew, I was suspended. No questions, no explanation. The light turned green. The taxi moved again. "I was a scapegoat," Ethan added. "Someone needed to fall, and I was convenient." Lila didn't respond. Not immediately. But when the taxi reached a quiet residential street near the Charles River, she tapped his shoulder. "Stop here." Ethan parked near a modest red brick townhouse. She opened the door, stepped out, and turned back to face him. "Wait here," she said. Ethan didn't argue. A few minutes later, she returned with a small metal box, worn, dented, and sealed with a rubber band. She handed it to him through the passenger window. "My father kept this locked in his closet. I found it last week." Ethan unwrapped the rubber band and opened the lid. Inside were a few old photographs, a gold-plated pen, and beneath them, a USB drive. "I haven't opened it yet," Lila said. "I thought maybe we should look at it together." Ethan looked at her, surprised. "You trust me?" "I don't know," she said honestly. But if you really didn't know what they were doing, then maybe you deserve a second chance. Ethan nodded once, then slipped the USB into his coat pocket. Let's find out what's on it. Back at his modest apartment above a shuttered bookstore in South Boston, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the USB drive lying in front of him like a loaded gun. Lila stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes scanning the cramped space. A sink stacked with dishes, a faded medical diploma on the wall, and a mattress on the floor instead of a bed frame. You really live like this? She asked softly. I stopped decorating after they revoked my license, Ethan muttered. Didn't see the point. He plugged the USB into his old laptop. The screen flickered, then displayed a folder titled Wellington Internal. Inside were PDFs, audio files, and one video. Ethan clicked on the first document. It was a scanned copy of a confidential hospital memo, dated just 2 weeks before David Grant's surgery. Authorization to proceed with Phase 2 human trials of Atravex, subject to strict non-disclosure. Consent waivers applied under Clause 18B, no public documentation permitted. Ethan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Atravex, he whispered. That drug was still in animal testing stages. He opened another file. Patient assignment logs. David Grant's name was highlighted with the label Group B Atravex trial. Ethan sat back in disbelief. They used your father as a test subject. Lila's face went pale. They never asked for consent, she said through clenched teeth. No one in my family signed anything. The next file was a doctored report, identical to the one Ethan had seen in his disciplinary hearing. But this one had digital tags in the metadata. The last editor was listed not as Ethan, but someone named R. Hallstrom, with an IP address tied to an office across the city. Ethan opened the video file. It was grainy security footage, a conference room, a meeting between senior hospital staff and 2 men in expensive suits. One of them Ethan recognized instantly, Dr. Armand Ricks, the hospital director. In the footage, Ricks leaned forward and said, If the trial succeeds, Atrova will cover every cost. We'll all walk away with 6-figure bonuses. But this stays buried. No records, no names. Ethan paused the video. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They killed him, Lila whispered. Not you, them. Ethan's hands trembled. And they destroyed my career to cover it up. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. But inside that small apartment, something far louder was happening. Truth was resurfacing, and it demanded justice. We need help, Ethan said finally. Someone outside the system. Lila looked at him. Who? Ethan closed the laptop. I might know someone. The next morning was overcast. The kind of gray Boston sky that made everything seem colder than it was. Ethan parked his car in front of a nondescript apartment building in East Cambridge. The place looked tired. Paint peeling, mailbox broken, a faint smell of mildew lingering in the stairwell. This is her place? Lila asked, scanning the door numbers. Ethan nodded. Nor 11. She was the head surgical nurse during your father's operation. She quit right after I was suspended. Why? She didn't say, just disappeared. They stopped in front of apartment 2B. Ethan raised his hand and knocked. Silence. He knocked again, firmer this time. Footsteps. A chain rattled. The door opened a few inches. A tired face peeked through the gap, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun. She squinted at Ethan, then frowned. No interviews, no statements. I told the press that already. We're not the press, Ethan said. We're looking for the truth. She started to close the door. Wait, Lila said quickly. My name is Lila Grant. My father died on Ethan's table. That stopped Nora. I remember him, she said softly. The man with the wedding band and a photo of his daughter in his wallet. Lila blinked, stunned. Can we talk? Ethan asked. Nora hesitated, then unlocked the door and stepped aside. Inside, the apartment was cramped but clean. A cat curled on a window ledge. Medical textbooks sat unopened on a dusty shelf. I know why you're here, Nora said as she poured tea into chipped mugs. I should have spoken up a year ago. I just didn't know who to trust. You can trust us now, Ethan said. Nora nodded. They forced me to prep the Atravex doses, she said, voice shaking. Said it was vitamin boosters for high-risk patients. But I read the label. I looked it up. It wasn't even FDA cleared for human use. Why didn't you refuse? Lila asked. I did, Nora said. Dr. Ricks called me into his office. He told me if I made noise, my license would be suspended. Just like Ethan. Ethan stared into his tea. They used David Grant for their trial, Nora continued. He reacted badly, but instead of stopping the procedure, they told Ethan to push through. The moment he crashed, I saw Ricks leave the observation deck. He didn't even look surprised. Layla's hands trembled. Do you have proof? Ethan asked. Nora reached beneath the couch and pulled out a locked box. She opened it to reveal a backup drive. I copied all the surgical logs, med orders, and internal emails before I left. I've been too afraid to do anything with it. Ethan took the drive carefully, like it was an organ during surgery. This could blow it wide open, he whispered. Nora looked at them both. I want justice too. But if you go after them, they'll come for you. We're already in it, Lila said, and we're not turning back. Outside, the clouds were beginning to break. A sliver of sunlight cut through, thin but persistent, like hope starting to claw its way through the darkness. Ethan placed the external drive on the table like a sacred relic. Back in his apartment, Lila plugged it into his laptop. The screen came to life with folders, dozens of them, all neatly labeled. Surgery logs, trial correspondence, Atravex internal, black box export. Lila's heart pounded as she clicked through them. Look at the dates, Ethan murmured. Every folder lines up with the week leading to your father's surgery. She opened trial correspondence first. Inside were email chains between Dr. Armand Ricks and executives from Atrova Pharmaceuticals. The subject lines were chilling. Final patient pool approval. Risk management strategy. Phase 2. Emergency PR scenario. Adverse reaction. One email caught Ethan's eye. From arix@wellingtonmed.org. 2. dfoster@atrova.com. Subject. Cole is too curious. Ethan's asking questions. If he digs, we're all exposed. Make sure he doesn't see full dosage logs. I'll take care of the board. Lila's mouth dropped open. They knew you were asking questions. They shut me down before I could get close, Ethan said, jaw tightening. They didn't just want a fall guy. They needed to control the narrative. Next, they opened /black box export, a folder containing backup files from the hospital's internal server. One file was a video labeled simply OR 03142021 on MP4. Ethan clicked play. A grainy video loaded, surveillance footage from the OR. It was the day of David Grant's surgery. There was Ethan, gowned and masked, leading the procedure. At the corner of the frame, visible through a small window, stood Dr. Ricks and a man in a dark suit with an Atrova badge. They watched through the glass, whispering. Then came the moment David's vitals began to spike. Heart rate 150, BP crashing, a nurse's voice shouted. Ethan on screen. Give him epinephrine! But in the video, a hand reached toward the medication tray and switched a syringe. The camera zoomed enough to catch a label, Atravex, 120 milligrams. Lila gasped. They swapped the meds, right there. Ethan paused the video, shaking. That wasn't part of the approved kit. They injected him with the trial compound mid-surgery. He closed the laptop slowly. This is manslaughter. No, Lila said. It's murder. A beat of silence passed. Then Ethan stood, pacing. If we take this to the press, they'll spin it. If we go to the hospital board, they'll bury it. Then we go to someone who can't be bought, Lila said. A legal team, a public trial. Ethan looked at her. Her face was set like stone. You're serious? My father died for a drug bonus. I'm not walking away. Ethan nodded, a fire lighting behind his eyes. Then we take them down. Ethan placed the external drive on the table like a sacred relic. Back in his apartment, Lila plugged it into his laptop. The screen came to life with folders, dozens of them, all neatly labeled. Surgery logs, trial correspondence, Atravex internal, black box export. Lila's heart pounded as she clicked through them. Look at the dates, Ethan murmured. Every folder lines up with the week leading to your father's surgery. She opened /trial correspondence first. Inside were email chains between Dr. Armand Ricks and executives from Atrova Pharmaceuticals. The subject lines were chilling. Re. Final patient pool approval. Re. Risk management strategy. Phase 2. Re. Emergency PR scenario. Adverse reaction. One email caught Ethan's eye. From erics@wellingtonmed.org to dfoster@atrova.com. Subject: Cole is too curious. Ethan's asking questions. If he digs, we're all exposed. Make sure he doesn't see full dosage logs. I'll take care of the board. Leela's mouth dropped open. They knew you were asking questions. They shut me down before I could get close, Ethan said, jaw tightening. They didn't just want a fall guy. They needed to control the narrative. Next, they opened Black Box Export, a folder containing backup files from the hospital's internal server. One file was a video labeled simply OR 03142021 MP4. Ethan clicked play. A grainy video loaded, surveillance footage from the OR. It was the day of David Grant's surgery. There was Ethan, gowned and masked, leading the procedure. At the corner of the frame, visible through a small window, stood Dr. Ricks and a man in a dark suit with an Atrova badge. They watched through the glass, whispering. Then came the moment. David's vitals began to spike.
Heart rate 150, BP crashing,
A nurse's voice shouted. Ethan on screen.
Give him epinephrine.
But in the video, a hand reached toward the medication tray and switched a syringe. The camera zoomed enough to catch a label. Atrovex, 120. Leela gasped. They swapped the meds right there. Ethan paused the video, shaking. That wasn't part of the approved kit. They injected him with the trial compound mid-surgery. He closed the laptop slowly. This is manslaughter? No, Lila said. It's murder. A beat of silence passed. Then Ethan stood pacing. If we take this to the press, they'll spin it. If we go to the hospital board, they'll bury it. Then we go to someone who can't be bought, Lila said. A legal team, a public trial. Ethan looked at her. Her face was set like stone. You're serious? My father died for a drug bonus. I'm not walking away. Ethan nodded, a fire lighting behind his eyes. Then we take them down. Wellington Medical Center stood like a fortress in the middle of the city. Tall, modern, clinical. It looked clean, safe. But Ethan and Lila now knew the truth. Behind the glass walls and smiling PR campaigns was a machine fueled by greed, silence, and bodies. It was nearly midnight when they parked 2 blocks away. We only get one shot at this, Ethan said, checking his watch. The backup servers reset every 72 hours. If we miss tonight, the logs get wiped. Lila nodded, dressed in dark jeans and a hoodie. You sure your old keycard still works? I'm not, he admitted, but I know where the side entrance doesn't have a camera. They moved swiftly through side alleys and slipped through the maintenance entrance near the east wing. The card reader blinked red, then green. The door clicked open. Ethan exhaled slowly. Still works. Inside, the halls were dimly lit, eerily quiet. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air like old guilt. They moved down the corridor, avoiding motion sensors and ducking past nurses' stations. Their destination, Archive Room 17B, where hard copies of surgical logs, dosage approvals, and internal incident reports were still stored on paper per legal requirement. When they reached the archive door, it was locked with a keypad. Any idea what the code is? Lila whispered. Ethan thought for a second. Try Rick's birthday, April 12th, 0412. She typed it in. Beep click. Seriously? Lila blinked. He's that predictable? Most narcissists are, Ethan muttered. They stepped inside. Rows and rows of file cabinets stretched across the room, each drawer labeled by year, department, and clearance level. We need surgical logs from March 2021 and board communications. They split up, rifling through cabinets under the low hum of fluorescent lights. After 10 minutes, Lila gasped. Got it! She held up a thick manila folder. Incident file, Grant, David, 03-14-21. Ethan flipped through it. Inside were paper logs confirming everything. the medication switch, the unapproved Atrovex trial, the list of board members who signed the waiver, including Dr. Armand Ricks. There was even a memo labeled Emergency PR Script, in case of death. "This is it," Ethan whispered. "This ends them." Suddenly, the hallway lights outside flickered. Voices echoed down the corridor. Lila's face went white.
Security?
They shut the cabinet and slipped the folder into Lila's backpack.
Back exit, Ethan hissed. Storage stairwell west end.
They darted down a narrow hallway just as two guards entered the archive wing. Footsteps thundered behind them. Ethan slammed open the stairwell door. They raced down 2 flights, turned a corner, and nearly collided with a third guard.
"Hey, stop!"
Lila kicked a mop bucket into the man's path. It clattered loudly as they barreled past, down a final flight, and out the fire exit into the alley behind the hospital. The cold night air hit them like a slap. They didn't stop running until they reached their car. Inside, gasping for breath, Ethan looked at Lila. "You okay?" She nodded, clutching the backpack to her chest. "We have it." Ethan started the engine. "Now it's war." The next morning, Wellington Hospital's boardroom was its usual blend of power and polish. Mahogany table, frosted glass walls, leather chairs for 12. But this time, the room held tension thick enough to slice with a scalpel. Dr. Armand Ricks stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 senior administrators and a corporate attorney from Atrova Pharmaceuticals. He adjusted his tie, voice measured. "So let me understand. Dr. Cole, a man whose license has been revoked, demands an audience with the full board because of documents he claims were stolen?" Ethan stood at the far end of the table. Lila sat beside him, a slim black folder in her lap. Across the room, Marla Jensen leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "We didn't steal anything," Ethan said calmly. "We recovered internal hospital records from a legal whistleblower, and what we found makes what happened to David Grant look less like a tragedy and more like corporate murder." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Rick smirked. "You always did love theatrics, Ethan." Lila spoke for the first time. "My father didn't sign up to be a lab rat, and I didn't spend a year following shadows to be dismissed by a coward in a suit." Rick's smile faded. Ethan opened the folder. He laid out the printed surgical logs, the signed waiver documents, the internal emails, and finally, a still photo from the OR surveillance video. Ricks, watching from behind the glass as the Atrovex syringe was swapped in. "This is enough to launch a federal investigation," Marla added. "We've already submitted copies to the Office of the Inspector General and 2 major news outlets. This is your only chance to come clean." Ricks's face twisted slightly. "You think threatening me in my own hospital will—" "I'm not threatening," Ethan cut in. "I'm giving you a choice. Step down, cooperate, or burn with the rest of them." Silence. The board members looked to one another. A few shifted in their seats. One, an older woman in a blue blazer, cleared her throat. "I want to see the full video," she said. "You will," Marla replied. "Tonight, on national television," Rick snapped. "You think the public will care? They'll forget in 2 days. People die in hospitals all the time." Layla stood, fire in her voice, but not like this. Not for profit. Not while you hide behind a desk and let men like my father bleed out for stock bonuses. That was the moment the room changed. One by one, the board members stood, slowly, uncertainly, but resolutely. The woman in the blue blazer turned to Ricks. "As of now, I motion to suspend Dr. Ricks pending federal review." Another voice followed. "Seconded?" A third. "Agreed." Ricks went pale. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Marla stepped forward. "No," she said. "You will." Later that night, Lila and Ethan sat in the front row of a live news studio. On screen, national anchor Stephanie Graves introduced the segment. Medical cover-up exposed. Whistleblower evidence rock hospital industry. The video played. The emails. The documents. The footage of Ricks behind the glass. Ethan glanced at Lila. Her hands were steady. Her chin lifted. For the first time since that night in the taxi, she looked free, and so did he. The Massachusetts State Medical Board convened in a cold chamber of wood and glass. Cameras were forbidden, but the air still buzzed with pressure. This wasn't just a hearing. It was the reckoning of a man's career, and perhaps the start of an industry-wide collapse. Ethan Cole sat at the witness table, hands folded, suit pressed, but collar damp with sweat. Beside him was Marla Jensen, cool and calm, like a war-seasoned general. Lila watched from the front row, her eyes unblinking. The lead examiner, Dr. Harold Penmore, spoke first. Dr. Cole, you were suspended last year following the unexpected death of patient David Grant during cardiac surgery. Do you now contend that his death was not due to malpractice, but corporate interference? Ethan leaned into the microphone. Yes, and I've submitted all supporting evidence. Penmore flipped through the binder in front of him. Printouts of emails, dosage records, security footage stills, and the signed confessions from 2 former staff members who had stepped forward after the broadcast. A second board member, Dr. Lee, interjected. Do you acknowledge that you failed to detect the medication switch during surgery? Ethan paused. I do, and I live with that every day, but I didn't know Atrovex was involved. I wasn't informed it was even in the hospital. I trusted a system that was already compromised. Whispers echoed through the room. Then, Penmore turned to the other table. Is the representative from Atrova present? A man in a navy suit rose. Dean Foster, legal counsel for the pharmaceutical giant. With all due respect, he began, this is a medical review, not a courtroom. The role of Atrova is immaterial to Dr. Cole's conduct. Sit down, Penmore snapped. The board has seen the footage. Your product was administered without consent. Your presence is tolerated, not welcomed. Leila allowed herself the faintest smile. Finally, Penmore looked directly at Ethan. Dr. Cole, after reviewing the documents, statements, and circumstances, the board has reached a decision. A pause. In light of the new evidence proving gross institutional negligence and active suppression of trial data, we hereby reinstate your license to practice medicine in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Effective immediately. A collective breath filled the room. Ethan closed his eyes. It was done. Applause broke out. Not from the board, but from the observers behind. Lila clapped once, then again, rising to her feet. Others joined her. Marla leaned toward Ethan and whispered, Told you, the truth wins. Eventually, Ethan looked back at the board. Thank you, he said softly, for letting me be a doctor again. For letting me be myself. Outside, the sky was clear and cold, but the morning sun poured over the courthouse steps like a blessing. Reporters swarmed, but Marla blocked them with a firm hand. Ethan turned to Lila. You did it, he said. You brought this all the way. No, she replied. We did. He extended a hand, but she stepped forward and hugged him instead. In that moment, the past was still real, but it no longer defined them. They had faced it, survived it, exposed it, and now they would rebuild. 6 months later, the old pharmacy on Dorchester Avenue had been transformed. The dusty shelves were replaced with clean exam rooms. The flickering lights were swapped out for warm LEDs, and above the glass door, a new sign gleamed in quiet dignity: Grant and Cole, Community Health and Legal Advocacy Center, where healing begins with truth. Inside, the hum of conversation and soft footsteps echoed through the waiting room. A mother rocked her coughing child. An elderly man filled out paperwork with shaking hands. And at the front desk sat Lila, now in a navy blouse with a stethoscope draped over her shoulders, gently explaining treatment options to a Spanish-speaking family. In the next room, Ethan adjusted a blood pressure cuff on a veteran's arm, smiling warmly. "Still drinking 2 cups of black coffee before breakfast?" he teased. "You remember that?" The man chuckled. "I remember what matters." The office was unlike any clinic in Boston. No pice boards. No billing counters. Grant and Cole ran on grants, community donations, and an army of volunteers. Many of them young doctors, nurses, and law students who had watched Ethan's case unfold and wanted to do better. In the back wing, a legal aid desk helped tenants facing eviction, families denied insurance claims, and whistleblowers who were afraid to speak. A poster above the desk read, "Silence doesn't keep you safe. Truth does." That afternoon, as the last patient left, Ethan joined Lila in the break room. She was reading an email, eyes narrowed, brow furrowed. "Another pharmaceutical rep?" he asked. "Worse," she said, turning the screen. A new case. A rural hospital in New Hampshire. Experimental device trial. 1 death already. No oversight. Ethan looked at her, then smiled gently. "You know we can't save everyone." "No," she said. "But we can start with 1. He nodded. "We always do." She stood up, grabbed her coat, and looked around the clinic. "I still can't believe it. My father died thinking no one would care." Ethan met her gaze. "But because of him, we built this." They stepped outside into the cool dusk. The sign above their heads caught the golden light of the setting sun. Grant and Cole, a name that now meant more than either of them alone. And as they locked the door and walked into the Boston night, it was no longer about revenge or redemption. It was about building a world where no one would be forgotten again.